Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 2528. A couple of setups are starting to pay off in Decommissioned, which is episode 6 from season 1 of The Bad Batch, and this is your Bad Batch briefing episode. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So, Decommissioned episode 6 from The Bad Batch, and this is a full spoiler briefing, so if you haven't checked out the show yet and don't want it spoiled for you, then save this for a later date. But if you're okay with me diving into the details, then let's do it. So, we are back on Ord Mantell again, and this is now the new base of operations for The Bad Batch. So, this is something that we talked about previously when we were talking about Rampage, which was episode 5, the notion that the description of the show way back when, before it had premiered, before we knew anything really about it, about them learning to find their way in this new galaxy and becoming mercenaries of sorts. Well, now they are kind of settling in to the business of being mercenaries, and Sid has a job for them already, and Hunter is like, I don't know if we're really going to do this, and she says, oh, let me decide for you. You're going to do this. So yeah, they're into their new life now, to some degree at least. So the job is to acquire a separatist tactical droid. There's a decommissioning plant on Corellia, and it's in Coronet City. Yes, the city from Solo: A Star Wars Story, where Han Solo grew up, and was hoping to see some sort of scum rat scurrying around situation, but unless it was like, buried back in a corner and you needed a 120-inch screen to be able to see it, I didn't see it, but anyway, so this decommissioning plant is really just a giant smelting plant where they're dropping all the droid body parts into a giant melting pit. And so they go after it, and there are various complications, as there always are. But they're not the only ones who are going after this thing, and it turns out that the two people who are already after the tactical droid as well are characters we've seen before. It's the Martez sisters, Trace and Rafa, who we originally met in Season 7 of the Clone Wars in the Ahsoka's Walkabout story arc. That was the middle story arc of the season. And possession of it goes back and forth until they're finally able to escape together because a whole bunch of police droids show up and all the action happens and so forth. And so they get away, but the tactical droid's head is lost in the process. But never fear, because Tech had managed to copy all of the information from the technical droid, or from the tactical droid, from the tactical droid's head prior to their departure, when they were trying to activate the thing to turn all the battle droids in the facility against the police droids in order to escape, right? One presumes that there are two copies of this, and so the Bad Batch is also leaving with their own copy to give away to Sid, because otherwise, what are they going to do? And if they don't perform on a job, then Sid's got less incentive to keep them around for other jobs and keep them safe, and suddenly it's going to be more worth her while to sell them out. And speaking of the Empire, that's sort of the big crux around which this whole episode turns. The idea that, as expressed by, I think it was Tech earlier on in the episode, that the tactical droid's head becomes very valuable to people who would be interested in fighting against the Empire, because at this time, the Empire is still using clones, right? They're working on their recruitment of non-clone soldiers, but it, has just turned over to the Empire. It's pretty recent. So yeah, the majority of their force, the enormously overwhelming majority, is clones. And so the idea that these tactical droids might have information to help fight against clones would become very valuable. And it turns out that that's a bit of foreshadowing, because apparently Rafa and Trace are somehow allied with a group that is considering fighting back against the Empire. We don't know who, but there is a mysterious message that is delivered at the end of the episode where, when Rafa and Trace are on their way away from Corellia, they call someone who appears in hologram, but it's only shot from behind, and you only get a little slice of the person, so you have no idea who this person is, like gender, species, nothing, right? And she says, Rafa says that they got the data that they were after, and that she knows about a group of rogue clones that are out there, and she knows where they are. And, when you hear it at first, you kind of think to yourself, ooh, like that sounds, rather suspicious, and is she going to, backstab them or something like that? But I have a feeling that might not be the case, that it might actually work the other way around, that people are actually looking for active allies, and knowing that these clones have decided to go against the Empire, well, everybody needs allies at this point. Meanwhile, the other shoe that looks like it's about to drop, or at least something resembling a drop in it, has happened, and that was with Wrecker. We talked in previous episodes about the fact that he kept going, "Arr!" and complaining about his head and having headaches. Well, smashed his head on something else and had a kind of fugue state situation where it seemed like the programming of the inhibitor chip inside of him started to kick in, because he started muttering about good soldiers and was just completely in a daze and out of it for much of the climactic battle that happened inside that decommissioning facility. But he seemed to come back to his normal, non-Order 66 affected senses and helped the Bad Batch escape. But, it feels like there's got to be some sort of aftermath about this, or some way of addressing it, because if it kicked in once, it's bound to kick in again, and ultimately something's going to have to be done about it. And speaking of that whole action sequence, I have to say that the sequence inside the droid factory was just wonderful. It was exciting. It kept raising the stakes to new levels, and the idea of having Omega like at the edge of the conveyor belt and about to fall into the pit, I thought she was going to get grabbed before she could fall in, but they actually had her fall in, which was totally unexpected. And the notion of her being able to land on the metal that hadn't quite sunk into the stuff yet, and it being burning hot and having to try and make her way to the edge to be able to be rescued, I thought that was really excellently done. And yeah, one of the best sequences that they've had so far. The action really is ramping up. I think they talked about the sort of cinematic nature of the opening of the Bad Batch in the Aftermath episode, right, with the whole Caleb Doom situation, but it feels like they're carrying that on into the subsequent episodes. The scene where Hunter takes his grappling hook and connects it to a support beam, and then the other end to the conveyor belt to pull stuff down, and all the crashing and happening, just really well done, and felt like a step above where things were with Clone Wars animation, and into something, even, bigger and more exciting. So there you go. That is what I've got for you, at least for the Bad Batch briefing on Decommissioned, which is episode 6 from season 1 of the Bad Batch, and that is going to do it for this episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.